Okay, so this is going to continue with chapter 2, macromolecules, and we're going to be taking a look at lipids in this section. Okay, we just finished with the carbohydrates, so again, this one is over lipids. So macromolecule lipids, what's going on? Just some basic information. Lipids are hydrophobic. That means they don't like to be around water, and you guys know that oil and water don't mix. Now, the odd thing about lipids, what makes it different from the other three macromolecules, is that this one is actually not made up of monomers. So there's not like a single repeating unit for lipids. Unlike with carbohydrates, we can say, well, all carbohydrates have a building block of some kind of sugar molecule. We can't say that with lipids. They're all different. There are actually 5 categories of lipids: saturated fatty acids, unsaturated fatty acids, triglycerides, phospholipids, and steroids, and you need to know the characteristics of each of those. In addition to knowing a little bit about them, I'm also going to show you their chemical structure. So you might see something like the chemical structure in a matching type question on the test. So you would have to match the chemical structure with what kind of lipid it might be. So saturated fatty acids, you all are familiar with them. You just haven't maybe ever heard them called saturated fatty acids. But these are solid at room temperature. They would be things like animal fats, so butter, lard, these are all saturated fatty acids. Increase the risk of heart disease and stroke, so these tend to be not very healthy. If y'all have ever fried bacon and left the bacon grease sitting on the counter, it will eventually turn into a solid. Again, animal fat, so that would be an example of a saturated fatty acid. And again, an organic molecule, because it's made up of carbons, right? That's one of the characteristics of it being organic. And you can see that with saturated fatty acids, they have what's called a carbon backbone. And then all of the hydrogens are kind of coming off of the carbon. This is a shorthand way to write that same structure up above, with each joint representing a carbon. And then it's understood that coming off of that carbon are these invisible hydrogens. So that's another way, shorthand way to write the chemical structure for a saturated fatty acid. Okay, unsaturated fatty acids, they're going to be liquid at room temperature, and these are going to be your plant-based oils or your plant-based fats, such as vegetable oil, canola oil, avocado oil, grapeseed oil. They're all liquid at room temperature. They tend to be a little bit more beneficial, not great, but better than the animal fats. And you can see the difference in structure in that unsaturated fats have what would be called a double bond. So each of these lines represents a bond, but an unsaturated fatty acid has a double bond between the two carbons. So, and it doesn't matter what two carbons, it just happens to be between these two. It really doesn't matter. It's just that there is a double bond present, and that means it's unsaturated. Why? Because you could actually break that bond and put 2 more hydrogens in this compound if you wanted to. Whereas the saturated fatty acid, if you notice, they are all single bonds connecting the carbons, and you cannot squeeze any more hydrogens into this compound if you wanted to. Every hydrogen is taking up a space. This one, you got some where you could put hydrogens, like I said, down there where that double bond is. Okay, just kind of some information about trans fats. You should, when you're looking at food labels, you shouldn't see any trans fats in your foods these days. They tend to be the worst between all of these fats. And originally they thought, oh, great, we've got something that's going to be solid at room temperature that actually has double bonds, so it's a win-win. These are actually the worst. These are adding hydrogens to make liquids more solid. Again, this actually raises your bad cholesterol and lowers your good cholesterol, and these are just some places where you would find trans fats. You know, the stuff that we like to eat, the good stuff. Now, another type of lipid is a triglyceride. This is how animals store fat. So we talked previously about how you store sugar, which is in the form of glycogen, but you store fat in the form of triglyceride, and it's located in fat cells. So if you were to take one of your fat cells and open it up, you would find triglyceride in there. And you're like, oh, that's fat storage. So what is the structure of a triglyceride? Tri meaning three. So it literally has three fatty acids, which are those long carbon chains with a bunch of hydrogens attached, to a glycerol molecule. And glycerol is a three carbon structure. So you can see right here these three carbons. And then you've got a fatty acid, a fatty acid, and a fatty acid attached. So this would be more of what that chemical structure of a triglyceride would look like. A phospholipid. We're going to be taking a look at a lot of phospholipids when we get into the next chapter, because this is the building block of cell membranes. So if you were to take a look at the plasma membrane of your cell, it would be made up of primarily phospholipids. So it is what's called amphipathic. Fancy word for saying that it has a site on the molecule that loves water and a site on the water molecule that hates water. So we have a hydrophobic, which is also known as the water-hating zone of the molecule, and hydrophilic, which is the water-loving area of the molecule. So it's one of those, kind of got both parts going on, where we said most lipids, all lipids, can't stand water. This one actually has a part that actually does like it, but it's got one that doesn't as well. So what is it made of? It's made up of a glycerol molecule. Remember that three carbon molecule where everything gets attached to. And then it's got two fatty acids attached, a fatty acid number 1 and a fatty acid number 2. But instead of having that third carbon attached to a fatty acid, it's actually attached to a phosphate. So again, lots of carbons, making it organic still. And you've got your fatty acid number 1 and your fatty acid number 2. And then off of that third carbon on the glycerol, you've got your phosphate, which is a phosphorus with a bunch of oxygens around it. So I'm not really going to, usually they indicate phosphate, a P with a circle. That's usually how phosphate's written. Okay, lipids, another kind, we've got steroids. Steroids, you've probably heard of these, cholesterol. And if you look at the name sterol, it kind of sounds like steroid. This is actually something else that's found in cell membranes. Vitamin D. Vitamin D that your body makes when you get exposed to sunlight is a steroid. And again, these are lipids, which means they don't like water. You know, cholesterol is not really a fan of water. Estrogen and testosterone, two hormones. Estrogen is made by the ovaries, testosterone is made by the testes. These are both examples of steroids. Now, if you look at the structure of steroids, it doesn't matter which one you're looking at, they all have a basic structure where they've got 4 carbon rings. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So they have stuff coming off of them that's different, but the one thing they have all in common is that it is a 4-ring structure. I'm not going to ask you to pick out each one, but you should recognize when you see this 4-ring structure, you should recognize it being a steroid. Okay, that's it for the lipids.